From the moment I walked into my mother's hospital room, the tension was palpable. Michael, my brother, leaned against the wall, scrolling through his phone, blissfully unaware of the chaos unfolding around us. He was the favorite son, the one who could do no wrong in our mother's eyes. Meanwhile, I had become her primary caregiver, juggling my job and personal life to accommodate her needs. It was exhausting and the burden was heavy. With our mother's health declining, we were due for a family meeting to discuss her care plan, but I knew Michael would only show up for the photo ops, as he always did. The clock was ticking and I couldn't keep this up forever. As I looked at my mother lying there, frail and vulnerable, I felt a mix of anger and sadness. How had it come to this? I had sacrificed so much for this family, yet here I was feeling invisible. My mother had always praised Michael for his charm and success, while I was left to take care of the dirty work. The countless nights I spent cooking, cleaning, and ensuring she took her medication were just expected of me. Meanwhile, Michael seemed to glide through life, his carefree attitude always winning our mother's affection. I could see it clearly now, the favoritism, the unfair expectations. Every time I entered that house, I felt like a ghost, invisible and unappreciated. It wasn't just about the physical care, it was about respect and recognition. I had been the one carrying the weight of our family, and I was tired of it. I deserved more than just being the fallback option when things got tough. I was ready for the family meeting to change the narrative, to stand up for myself and demand what I deserved. The days leading up to that meeting were filled with anxiety and anticipation. I rehearsed what I would say, preparing myself for the pushback I knew was coming. I refused to let Michael's charm and my mother's affection for him intimidate me any longer. I had finally reached my breaking point, and it was time to reclaim my voice and my life. Every time I stepped into my mother's house, the air felt thick with unspoken rules. Michael would waltz in with his charm, while I was expected to handle the nitty-gritty. It was like a well-rehearsed play, and I had been cast in the role of the dutiful daughter, always ready to clean up after everyone else. I remember the last family dinner vividly. I was the one who cooked the meal, cleaned the house, and made sure our mother took her medication. I spent hours in the kitchen preparing her favorite dishes, while Michael strolled in with his usual swagger, expecting the red carpet rolled out for him. When it came time to share the praises, all eyes were on him, the golden child, while I stood in the background, invisible. I was tired of being the one who sacrificed her time, energy, and emotional well-being. The unspoken rule was clear. I was responsible for our mother's care, while Michael was free to come and go as he pleased. With each visit, my resentment grew, and I started to tally the costs: late nights, missed work, and my own health declining. I could feel my own spirit withering under the weight of expectations. It was as if I was wearing a heavy coat that I couldn't take off, and every time I saw Michael basking in our mother's affection, it felt like another layer being added to that coat. The last straw came when I began to realize how much I had been sacrificing. I had put my career on hold to be there for my mother, missing out on promotions and opportunities that were rightfully mine. Every time I answered a phone call from work, I could hear my mother's voice in the background, reminding me of my duties. I had fallen into a pattern where my own life revolved around her needs. I remember one night sitting on my bed feeling overwhelmed. I had just finished a long shift, and instead of relaxing, I was faced with a pile of laundry, and a kitchen that looked like a tornado had hit it. I felt so alone, so unappreciated. Michael, on the other hand, was off living his life. He went on vacations, had dinner parties, and posted pictures on social media as if everything was perfect. I couldn't help but feel resentment every time I saw him enjoying himself without a care in the world. The family dynamics were so skewed, and I was the one left holding the bag. I wanted to scream to make them see how unfair it all was, but instead I internalized everything. I told myself that I should be grateful for having a family, even though it felt like a burden most days. As the date for the family meeting approached, I felt a mix of dread and determination. I knew I couldn't keep doing this. I had tried being the good daughter, the responsible one, but it hadn't changed anything. I would still be the one left to pick up the pieces while Michael got all the glory. I began to outline what I wanted to say, preparing myself for the inevitable pushback. I had to make them see the truth. I was no longer willing to be the silent caretaker. In my mind, I pictured the family gathered around the table, their faces filled with confusion as I laid out the reality of our situation. I imagined Michael's reaction when I confronted him about the way he treated me and our mother. I knew he would scoff and dismiss me, just like he always did. But this time would be different. I was done being the invisible daughter, the one who did all the hard work while he got the accolades. I was ready to reclaim my voice, and for the first time in a long while I felt empowered. This family meeting was going to be my turning point, and I wasn't going to hold back. The day before the meeting, I overheard Michael on the phone, giving our mother dangerous medical advice he found on social media. "You should try this new herbal remedy," he said, his tone casual, as if he were discussing a new restaurant. I felt my stomach twist. It was the last straw. I couldn't believe that the person who was supposed to be a responsible adult could be so reckless with our mother's health. I marched into the kitchen where he was sitting and confronted him. "Michael, you can't be serious. That stuff isn't even proven to work. What if it harms her?" He just laughed it off, brushing me aside like I was overreacting. "Come on, Lisa. Mom needs something to boost her spirits, and this sounds fun," he replied, waving his hand dismissively. It hit me hard. I wasn't just the overlooked daughter. I was being replaced by a dangerous trend follower. He didn't care about the consequences. He only wanted to play the part of the cool son. That night, I felt a knot tightening in my chest. I replayed our conversation in my head, my anger simmering just below the surface. Hadn't he seen how much I was doing for our mother? I had been the one managing her medications, making sure she ate, and keeping her comfortable. And what did I get in return? Nothing but a lack of respect and constant comparisons to his seemingly perfect life. I decided that at the family meeting, I would no longer be the silent caretaker. I would shift the responsibility onto him, and I wouldn't hold back. I spent hours drafting a plan in my mind, thinking about all the times I had been the one to pick up the pieces while he enjoyed the spotlight. It was time to turn the tables. I recalled the sacrifices I had made over the past few years. I had missed countless outings with friends, postponed my own plans, and even taken on extra work shifts just to be there for my mother. Each time I did something for her, I felt a sense of duty, but now it felt like a weight I could no longer bear. I felt trapped in a cycle of obligation, and I was determined to break free. As I lay in bed that night, I resolved to confront Michael directly. I would call out the truth about how he had been skirting his responsibilities all along. I imagined how the family would react when I finally spoke up about the favoritism and the unfair expectations placed on me. I could picture the shock on their faces when they realized that I wasn't going to play the role of the dutiful daughter anymore. I pictured the family gathered around the table, their faces filled with confusion and disbelief as I laid out the reality of our situation. I imagined Michael's reaction when I confronted him about the way he treated me and our mother. I knew he would scoff just like he always did. But this time would be different. I was done being the invisible daughter, the one who did all the hard work while he got the accolades. The night before the meeting, I barely slept. I tossed and turned, rehearsing my speech in my head, figuring out how to present my case. I would lay it all out. The sacrifices I had made, how I had borne the brunt of our mother's care, and how Michael had been free to live his life without a care in the world. I was going to demand that he step up. I woke up the next morning with a mix of anxiety and determination. This was it. I knew I couldn't keep doing this. I had tried being the good daughter, the responsible one, but it hadn't changed anything. I would still be the one left to pick up the pieces while Michael got all the glory. I had to make them see the truth. As I got dressed, I felt a sense of empowerment wash over me. I was ready to reclaim my voice, and for the first time in a long while I felt empowered. This family meeting was going to be my turning point, and I wasn't going to hold back. I had rehearsed what I would say, and I felt ready to stand my ground. No more sacrificing my own happiness for the benefit of a brother who didn't appreciate the work I put in. As I prepared to leave for the hospital, I took a deep breath, reminding myself that I was worthy of respect and recognition. I wasn't just the caretaker, I was Lisa, and I was ready to be seen. At our family meeting the next day, I laid it all out on the table. "Michael, if you think you know better than the doctors, then you can take over Mom's care," I stated firmly, my voice steady. The room was tense, and I could see the disbelief on his face. I was tired of being the one who did all the hard work while he got all the praise. I outlined exactly what I was stepping away from: her medications, her doctor's appointments, and even the day-to-day responsibilities. It was time to make it clear that if he was so confident in his social media advice, then he could show up for more than just the family photos. I took a deep breath, recalling all the times I had sacrificed my own needs for the sake of our family. I was the one who had been there every time our mother needed assistance. The one who took time off work to make sure she was comfortable. The one who spent countless nights worrying about her health. I had been the dutiful daughter, but I was done with that role. I had to reclaim my life, and I wasn't going to do it quietly. Look, I've been taking care of Mom for years now while you've been living your life without a care in the world. It's not fair, and I'm fed up with it. I'm stepping back, and you need to step up. If you think those herbal remedies you read about will help her, then you can be the one to manage her care. I'll no longer be the one cleaning up the mess. Michael's eyes narrowed as he processed my words. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by me. He scoffed at my proposal, clearly dismissing my concerns as if I were overreacting. Come on, Lisa. You can't just abandon Mom like that. She needs you, he exclaimed, his voice rising. I held my ground, feeling a mix of anger and empowerment. No, Michael, you need to step up. You can't keep pretending everything is fine while I do all the work. You're not a kid anymore. You're a grown man, and it's time you acted like one. This is your chance to prove to everyone that you're capable of more than just showing up for family photos. The silence in the room was deafening. I could see my mother sitting there, her expression a mix of confusion and worry. I didn't want to upset her, but I was tired of being the one who bore the weight of our family's dysfunction. I had to make them see how unfair this all was. I had to make Michael understand that his inaction had consequences. As I laid out my proposal, I watched his face twist with disbelief. He didn't like being confronted, especially not in front of our mother and the rest of the family. I could see the gears turning in his mind, trying to figure out how to regain control of the situation. But I wasn't going to let him. I had come too far to back down now. You think it's easy being the one responsible for everything? You think I enjoy sacrificing my time and energy for someone who doesn't even appreciate it? I continued, my voice firm. I'm tired of being the one who does all the work while you sit back and enjoy the rewards. It's time for you to take responsibility. Michael crossed his arms, his expression hardening. He was clearly angry, but I didn't care. I had spent too long being the silent caretaker, and it was time for him to feel the weight of the situation. I could feel the tension building in the room as our family watched, waiting for the inevitable backlash from him. But I stood my ground, knowing that this was a pivotal moment. I had to break the cycle of favoritism and neglect. I wouldn't let Michael's charm and mother's affection intimidate me any longer. I was reclaiming my voice, and I was going to demand respect. You can't keep pretending that I'll always be there to pick up the pieces, Michael. It's time you step up and show everyone what you're made of. This isn't just about Mom. It's about all of us and the roles we've played in this family. I refused to continue being the scapegoat. The look on his face was priceless. He was caught off guard, and I could sense the shift in the atmosphere. For the first time, I felt like I was being heard, and it felt liberating. I wasn't just shouting into the void. I was making a statement. And as I looked around the room, I could see my family processing what I was saying. They had always seen me as the responsible one, the one who would always be there to shoulder the burden. But now they were witnessing a different side of me. A side that was tired of being overlooked and undervalued. I was ready to take a stand, and I wasn't going to back down. As the meeting progressed, the pressure mounted. Our mother, confused and frightened, looked back and forth between us. Michael leaned in, his voice dripping with faux concern. You can't just abandon Mom now, Lisa. She needs you, he said, trying to play the guilt card. But I knew better. No, Michael, you need to step up. You can't keep pretending everything is fine while I do all the work, I replied, my heart racing but my resolve firm. I could feel the tension in the room, but I wouldn't back down. It was time for him to face the reality of caregiving, and I was done being the scapegoat. I watched as he shifted uncomfortably in his chair, realizing he was losing control of the narrative. You're being dramatic, he shot back, trying to regain his footing. Mom is sick, and she needs her family around her, not someone who's going to run away. I felt a surge of anger rise within me. How dare he twist this around? I'm not running away, Michael. I'm saying I won't be the only one carrying this load anymore. It's not fair to either of us, and it's definitely not fair to Mom. If you genuinely care about her, you need to prove it. Step up or I'm walking away. The atmosphere thickened with unresolved tension as I stood my ground. Michael's facade of concern was crumbling, and I could see the anger bubbling beneath the surface. You think you're so much better than me just because you've taken care of her? You act like you're the only one who matters here. It's always about you, isn't it? His words cut deep, but I refused to let them deter me. This isn't about me, Michael. This is about Mom and her care. You've had every opportunity to be involved, and you've chosen to be absent. I'm done being the only one who cares enough to step up. The room remained silent, tension crackling in the air as I faced off against my brother. I could feel my mother's gaze shifting back and forth between us, her eyes wide with worry. It was clear she didn't want to choose sides. But the reality was that the truth was laid bare in front of her. I pressed on, my voice steady. You need to take responsibility for once. I can't handle this alone anymore. I have my own life, my own job, and I can't continue sacrificing everything for a brother who only shows up when it's convenient. Michael's face flushed with anger. You think you can just throw this on me? I'm not equipped to deal with this. I don't know how to handle her medications or her appointments. Exactly, I shot back. You've never tried to learn. You've always left it to me while you lived your life. Now it's time for you to step out of your comfort zone and actually be here for her. If you want to play the part of the concerned son, then you need to act like one. As I spoke, I could see the gears turning in Michael's mind. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by me. The disbelief on his face was palpable, and I felt a rush of empowerment. This was my moment. I would not be silenced any longer. With every word, I felt the weight lifting off my shoulders. This was no longer just about our mother. It was about reclaiming my own life and standing up for myself. I had spent far too long being the silent caretaker, and it was time for him to feel the weight of the situation. Mom deserves better than this, I continued, my voice unwavering. She deserves a family that cares enough to put in the effort, not just someone who shows up for appearances. If you think you can just coast along while I do all the work, you're mistaken. Michael's expression shifted from disbelief to anger as he realized I was serious. He was cornered and he didn't like it. So what? You're just going to walk away? You're going to leave her to me? Yes, I replied firmly. If you truly care about her, you'll step up. If you can't handle it, then maybe it's time for you to face the reality of what it means to be a part of this family. The silence in the room was deafening. I could feel the weight of our mother's gaze on me, but I refused to falter. I had made my choice and I was ready to enforce it. No more would I be the one carrying the burden of our family's dysfunction. As I looked at Michael, I could see the realization dawning on him. He was losing his grip, and I felt a rush of satisfaction. This was my moment to shine, to be heard, and to reclaim my life. I didn't care what happened next. I was ready to break the cycle and finally take a stand. The meeting turned chaotic when our mother needed her medication, and Michael froze. I watched as he fumbled through the cabinet, clearly out of his depth. Where's her pain reliever? He muttered, frustration mounting. I could sense the anticipation in the room. Everyone expected me to jump in and save the day. But I remained silent. The weight of the moment hung thick in the air as I let the chaos unfold. This was his moment to shine, but he was stumbling and I wouldn't interfere. The family's gaze shifted from him to me, questioning my decision to hold back, but I stood firm. I could feel the tension building, the whispers and side glances among my relatives as they processed what was happening. Michael, the golden child, was now in the hot seat, and I was determined to let him flounder. This was the reality I had been trying to escape, the one where I was always the dependable one, the one who took charge while he basked in the glory of being the favorite son. As I watched him struggle, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Part of me wanted to step in to show him how to find the medication to make things right for our mother. But another, stronger part of me insisted that he needed to experience this discomfort. He needed to understand the weight of responsibility that I had borne for far too long. I had spent years being the one who managed everything, and it was time for him to step up. Lisa, can you help him? One of my aunts finally asked, her voice laced with concern. I could see the worry etched on her face, and a part of me felt guilty for not jumping in. But I shook my head, my heart racing. No, I'm done playing that role. He needs to figure this out on his own, I replied, my voice steady. Michael shot me a look of disbelief, his frustration boiling over. You can't just leave me hanging like this, he snapped, his voice rising. I could feel the anger radiating off him, and I met his gaze without flinching. Why not? You've left me hanging for years, Michael. It's time you face the reality of what it means to take care of someone. You can't always rely on me to be there to pick up the pieces, I countered, my tone firm. The room fell silent, and I could see the shock on my family's faces as they absorbed my words. They were watching the unraveling of my brother, and for the first time they were witnessing the truth of our family dynamic. Michael was never going to be the responsible one unless he was forced to be. I can't do this, he exclaimed, his voice cracking under the strain. I don't know how to handle her medications or appointments. Exactly, I shot back. You've never even tried. You've always left it to me while you lived your life. Now it's your turn to step out of your comfort zone and actually be here for her. If you want to play the part of the concerned son, then you need to act like one. As the chaos unfolded, I felt a sense of empowerment wash over me. I had taken a stand, and now it was clear for everyone to see the imbalance in our family. Michael's mask was slipping, and I felt lighter, liberated even. I had finally stopped carrying the burden of responsibility alone. The tension was palpable as I glanced around the room. My family was witnessing Michael's incompetence firsthand, and I could see the doubt creeping into their minds. They were starting to question the narrative they had been fed for so long, that Michael was the perfect son and I was the one who just needed to accept my role. I held my ground, watching as Michael's frustration turned to panic. He didn't like being in this position, and I could see him struggling to regain control of the situation. But I wouldn't let him. I was done being the one to save the day. If you can't handle this, then maybe it's time for you to face the reality of what it means to be a part of this family, I said, my voice steady. Mom deserves better than this. She deserves a family that cares enough to put in the effort, not just someone who shows up for appearances. Michael's expression shifted from disbelief to anger as the truth of my words sank in. He was cornered, and I felt a rush of satisfaction. For once, the family was seeing him for who he truly was. Someone who had always relied on me to do the hard work while he basked in the sunlight of our mother's affection. I glanced at my mother, who looked lost amidst the rising tension. I didn't want to upset her, but it was time for her to see the truth as well. I had spent years protecting her from the realities of our family, but now it was time for someone else to step up. I took a deep breath, letting the weight of the moment fill the room. This was my chance to reclaim my voice, to demand respect, and to refuse to be the scapegoat any longer. I was ready to break the cycle of favoritism and neglect that had defined our family for far too long. Finally, I could take it no longer. I calmly stood up and announced, I'm stepping away. Michael, you've got this. With that, I walked out of the room, leaving the chaos to unfold. I could hear the panic in their voices as I left. My heart raced, but I felt liberated. I was finally free from the shackles of responsibility that had bound me for so long. I heard my mother call out to me, but I didn't look back. This was Michael's chance to show everyone what he was made of. I didn't care what happened next. I had made my choice. The moment I stepped out, I felt a rush of adrenaline. I had spent years catering to my family's needs, bending over backward to ensure everything was smooth. But no more. As I walked away from that room, I felt the weight lifting off my shoulders, and for the first time in a long time I felt a sense of empowerment. I was reclaiming my life. I heard the voices inside the meeting room grow louder as I made my way down the hall. Michael's frustrated shouts pierced through the door, and I couldn't help but smile at the thought of him floundering. He was finally facing the reality he had avoided for so long. I had let the chaos happen, and now it was his responsibility to pick up the pieces. As I sat in the quiet of the waiting area, I reflected on everything that had led me to this moment. I had spent so many years feeling invisible, always the one who was there for everyone else while Michael enjoyed the spotlight. I was tired of being the one who handled all the hard stuff while he coasted by on charm and favoritism. I needed to put myself first, even if it meant leaving my family to figure things out without me. My phone buzzed in my pocket, pulling me from my thoughts. It was a text from one of my friends checking in on me. I typed a quick response, letting her know I was okay but needed some time to breathe. I couldn't shake the feeling of relief washing over me. I had finally broken free from the cycle of neglect and resentment. As I waited, I overheard snippets of conversations from the meeting room. The family was still trying to navigate the chaos I had left behind. I could hear my mother's voice wavering with concern. "Michael, you can't just let this happen. Lisa has always taken care of things." I felt a pang of guilt, but I quickly shoved it aside. I had done enough for everyone else. It was time for them to see the truth about Michael. He was not the perfect son everyone thought he was. He was just a man who had never had to step out of his comfort zone because I had always been there to do it for him. Minutes passed, and I found myself smiling as I imagined Michael struggling to manage the situation. I could picture him trying to decipher medication bottles and fumbling through our mother's care routine. It was a sight I had longed to see for years. I had always been the one to step in and save the day, but now it was his turn to face the consequences of his inaction. Finally, I heard the door swing open and Michael stormed out, his expression a mix of anger and panic. He spotted me immediately, and I could see the frustration boiling in his eyes. "You can't just leave me like this," he shouted, his voice echoing in the hall. I met his gaze without flinching. "I told you, Michael, I'm stepping away. It's time for you to figure it out on your own," I replied, my voice steady. I wanted him to see that I was serious, that I wasn't going to back down this time. "You're being selfish," he yelled, his voice rising in pitch. "Mom needs us and you just walked out." I felt my anger surge at his words. "No, Michael, you've been selfish all these years. You've left me to handle everything while you played the perfect son. This isn't just about Mom. It's about us and the roles we've chosen to play in this family. If you really care, then step up and prove it." As I spoke, I could see him struggling to regain control of the narrative. The disbelief on his face was satisfying, and I could tell he wasn't used to being challenged. I stood my ground, refusing to let him twist the situation back on me. "You think this is easy for me?" he shot back, crossing his arms defensively. "You think I can just snap my fingers and know how to take care of Mom?" "Exactly," I retorted. "You've never even tried. You've always relied on me to do the hard work. Now it's your turn to step up. If you want to be seen as the concerned son, then act like one." The tension in the air was thick, and I could feel my family watching us, waiting to see how this would unfold. I wasn't going to back down. I was done being the dependable one. "You don't understand what it's like to carry this burden," Michael exclaimed, frustration spilling over. "And you don't understand what it's like to be ignored and undervalued," I shot back. "I've carried this family for too long and I'm done. If you can't handle the responsibility, then maybe you don't deserve to be part of this family." His face turned red with anger, and I could see the realization dawning on him. He was losing control and I felt a rush of satisfaction. This was my moment. I was finally standing up for myself for once. As the chaos continued around us, I stood tall, ready to face whatever came next. I was reclaiming my voice, and I wouldn't let anyone take that away from me. I was done being the scapegoat. This was my time to shine. When I returned later, I found the meeting had spiraled out of control. Michael was furious, blaming me for abandoning our mother. "You ruined everything, Lisa. You're so selfish," he yelled, his face contorted with rage. I stood there, feeling validated as I watched the family react to his outburst. They were witnessing the truth of his incompetence for the first time. It was no longer just my word against his. They were seeing the cracks in his facade. I didn't have to defend myself. The truth was out for everyone to see. I felt a strange sense of peace wash over me as I realized I no longer feared his anger. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment when the family would finally see how he had always manipulated the narrative in his favor. Michael's outburst only highlighted his inability to handle the responsibilities that came with caring for our mother. As I took a deep breath, I could feel the tension in the room grow thicker. The family was no longer looking at me with pity. They were now questioning Michael's actions. I could see my mother's confusion and fear mirrored in the faces of my relatives. They were starting to realize that I had been carrying the weight of our family's dysfunction for far too long. Michael's anger escalated as he pointed a finger at me, his voice rising. "You think you can just walk away and leave me to deal with this? You're not the perfect daughter you think you are." His words stung, but I refused to let him get under my skin. "I'm not the perfect daughter, Michael, but at least I've been here. actually caring for Mom while you've been playing the role of the concerned son without doing any of the work. My voice was steady and clear, cutting through the chaos. I could see the realization dawning on my family's faces. They were beginning to understand the dynamic between us. Michael had always been the one to coast through life, relying on my dedication and hard work to keep everything running smoothly. Now with the spotlight on him, he was fumbling and it was uncomfortable to watch. "You're being ridiculous," he shot back, trying to regain control of the situation. "You're abandoning your responsibilities." "No, Michael. I'm just making you face the consequences of your actions. Mom deserves more than just someone who shows up for appearances. She deserves someone who will actually take care of her." I felt my conviction strengthen with each word. The room fell silent, the only sound being Michael's heavy breathing as he grappled with the reality of the situation. For the first time, he was being exposed as the fraud he was. I didn't have to convince anyone of my worth. They were seeing it clearly. As the tension in the room continued to build, I felt a surge of empowerment. I had finally stood up for myself, and I could see that my family was starting to take notice. I was no longer the invisible daughter, the one who always did the hard work while Michael basked in the favor of our mother. I was reclaiming my identity, my voice, and my worth. Michael's face turned red with frustration, and I could see he was struggling to find a way to spin the narrative back in his favor. "You're just going to leave me here to deal with all of this?" he shouted, his voice cracking under the pressure. "Yes, I am," I replied firmly. "If you truly care about Mom, you'll step up and prove it. You can't keep pretending everything is fine while I do all the work." The tension in the room shifted. My family was witnessing the truth unfold before their eyes, and I felt a strange sense of satisfaction knowing they were finally seeing the reality of the situation. Michael was no longer the golden child. He was just a man who had never had to step out of his comfort zone because I had always been there to save him. As the chaos continued, I could hear my mother's voice, shaky and confused. "Michael, you need to help her. You can't just let Lisa walk away like this." I felt a pang of guilt at her concern, but I quickly reminded myself that I had done enough. It was time for them to see the truth about Michael, and I was ready to let the chips fall where they may. Michael's outbursts became more frantic as he struggled to handle the situation. He shouted for our mother, asking her questions that showed he had no idea what he was doing. I watched as he fumbled with her medications, clearly out of his depth. It was a sight I had longed to see for years. This was the moment of reckoning, and I was glad to be a witness. I felt a sense of liberation wash over me. I had finally let go of the burden of responsibility that had weighed me down for so long. I was no longer defined by my role as the caretaker. I was reclaiming my life. As I stood there, I could feel the warmth of my family's gaze shifting from Michael to me. They were beginning to see the truth of our family dynamic, and I felt a rush of satisfaction knowing that I had finally broken free from the cycle of favoritism and neglect. Michael's mask was falling, and I didn't have to lift a finger to expose him. The truth was unfolding before everyone's eyes, and I felt lighter, liberated even. I had finally stopped carrying the weight of our family's dysfunction alone. As the chaos continued, I knew that I had made the right decision. I was ready to step away and prioritize my own well-being. I had spent far too long being the one who managed everything, and it was time for Michael to realize the consequences of his inaction. "You think this is easy for me?" he shouted, his frustration boiling over. "I don't care," I shot back. "This is your chance to step up. You've always relied on me to do the hard work while you basked in the glory of being the favorite son. Now it's your turn to face the reality of being a part of this family." The room held its breath, and I could sense that my family was finally beginning to see the truth. Michael was not the perfect son. He was just a man who had never had to step up because I had always been there to do it for him. As I looked around the room, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I had finally taken a stand and I wasn't going to back down. I had broken the cycle, and I was ready to reclaim my life. As the chaos continued, it was becoming clearer than ever that Michael's shortcomings were on full display. He stumbled through the medication cabinet, his frustration palpable as he struggled to read the labels. I could see my family's expression shift from concern to disbelief, and for the first time, they were witnessing the truth of what I had been saying all along. Michael could not handle the simplest of tasks, and it was painfully obvious. "Where's her pain reliever?" he muttered. his voice rising in irritation. I watched as he rifled through the bottles, clearly overwhelmed. I could feel the tension in the room thickening as everyone's eyes darted between him and me, waiting for me to swoop in and save the day like I always had. But this time I held my ground. I had made my choice and I was not going to step in. The pressure on Michael was mounting, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. For years, I had been the one to carry the burden of our family's dysfunction. I had constantly stepped in to manage everything while Michael basked in the praise and the glory of being the favorite son. But today the tables were turning, and it was his moment to shine or flop. For a fleeting moment, I felt guilty watching him struggle. But then I remembered all the times I had been overlooked and undervalued. I had sacrificed my own needs, my time, and my well-being for the sake of my family. It was time for them to see the truth about Michael. This was his chance to prove his worth, and I was done being the scapegoat. The room fell silent, and I could hear my mother's concerned voice cutting through the tension. "Michael, you need to find it. It's important," she said, her tone trembling with anxiety. I felt a pang of empathy for her, but I quickly brushed it aside. She had always relied on me to manage everything, and it was time for her to see that Michael was not the reliable son she imagined him to be. "I can't find it," Michael exclaimed, his frustration spilling over. "What kind of son am I if I can't even take care of my own mother?" He was grasping for straws, trying to regain control of the narrative. I could see the embarrassment creeping into his face, and I felt a rush of vindication. "The kind who's never had to try, apparently," I said, my voice steady as I stood my ground. "This is your moment, Michael. You've always let me do the heavy lifting while you played the golden child. Now you need to step up and show that you can handle this." He glared at me, his eyes blazing with anger. "You have no idea what it's like," he shot back, his voice thick with resentment. "And you have no idea what it's like to be the one who does everything while you play the part of the concerned son." I snapped, feeling the weight of my words. It was liberating to finally voice my frustrations. The family was witnessing the reality of our situation unfold in real time, and I found a strange comfort in that. As Michael continued to fumble through the cabinet, I could see the realization dawning on the faces of our relatives. They were beginning to understand that I wasn't the problem, Michael was. He had relied on my dedication and hard work for too long, and now that he was expected to step up, he was failing spectacularly. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife, and I could feel the anticipation building. Michael was losing his grip, and I was finally free from the shackles of responsibility that had bound me for so long. This was his moment to prove himself, and he was floundering. Finally, he slammed the cabinet door shut, frustration radiating off him in waves. "This is ridiculous. You can't just leave me like this," he shouted, desperation creeping into his voice. I met his gaze, unwavering. "You think I'm the one being ridiculous? I'm finally stepping back and letting you face the consequences of your actions. You can't keep pretending everything is fine while I do all the work." His face turned crimson, and I could see the anger bubbling beneath the surface. But this time it didn't scare me. I felt empowered, knowing that I was finally standing up for myself. The room was a mix of disbelief and discomfort as they watched the dynamic between us play out. I could see my mother's concern etched on her face, but I also noticed a flicker of realization in her eyes. She was beginning to see the truth about Michael. He was not the perfect son. He was just a man who had never had to step up because I had always been there to do it for him. As the chaos continued, I felt a sense of liberation wash over me. I had finally let go of the burden of responsibility that had weighed me down for so long. I was no longer defined by my role as the caretaker. I was reclaiming my life and my worth. Michael's mask was falling, and I didn't have to lift a finger to expose him. The truth was unfolding before everyone's eyes, and I felt lighter, liberated even. I had finally stopped carrying the weight of our family's dysfunction alone. As I stood there, I could feel the warmth of my family's gaze shifting from Michael to me. They were starting to see the truth, and I felt a rush of satisfaction knowing that I had finally broken free from the cycle of favoritism and neglect. Michael's incompetence was now undeniable. The chaos he had created was unfolding, and I was no longer the one left to pick up the pieces. I was done being the scapegoat, and I was finally ready to put myself first. The tension in the room continued to build, And I could see Michael grappling with the reality of the situation. This was his moment to prove himself and he was stumbling. I could hear my mother's voice, shaky and confused. "Michael, you need to help her. You can't just let Lisa walk away like this." I felt a pang of guilt at her concern, but I quickly reminded myself that I had done enough. It was time for them to see the truth about Michael, and I was ready to let the chips fall where they may. As I stood there, I felt a surge of empowerment. I had finally taken a stand and I wasn't going to back down. I was reclaiming my identity, my voice, and my worth. This was my time to shine. In the weeks that followed, I finally found solace in my newfound freedom. I had distanced myself from the toxic dynamics of my family, a choice that felt both liberating and terrifying. While Michael continued to flounder, desperately trying to navigate the responsibilities I had once shouldered, I focused on my own well-being. I visited my mother occasionally, but I made it clear to myself that I was no longer responsible for her care. I had learned to set boundaries, prioritizing my own needs over the demands of others. The family still whispered about me, still attempted to guilt-trip me into returning, but their words no longer held power over me. I had built a life that didn't revolve around their expectations. When I received a call from Michael, I listened to his complaints about how overwhelmed he felt, but I felt no urge to engage. I simply hung up, feeling a sense of calm wash over me. I started taking small trips for myself, exploring places I had always wanted to see but never had the chance. I revamped my home, creating a space that reflected my personality rather than the needs of others. I even took a weekend trip to the beach, enjoying the sun and the waves without the anxiety of family obligations weighing me down. As I sipped my coffee on the balcony, overlooking the ocean, I realized I was finally at peace. I had learned to find joy in my own life, free from the burdens of the past. I had broken the cycle, and I was ready to embrace my future. No more chaos, no more guilt. Just me reclaiming my life one day at a time.